Also, in today's community report, Clara, our resident sociologist, had some relevant things to say to the world.
So this is my kitchen. You can even see that there is a fly trap behind me. That's something I would have removed if I had really thought about this, because that is disgusting. Right now I am roasting chicken to eat later today, and I feel like I need to justify that to myself and to the world, like literally to the world, because I'm live streaming.
A holy sensation. Sip the Kool-Aid, baby. Pass the cup, don't say maybe. Once you're in, you're never out. Say amen, scream and shout. Sip the Kool-Aid, baby. Pass the cup, don't say maybe. That's a baby. Once you're in, you're never out. Say now don't you question, just obey. Groove with us and fade away.
Previously on Game of Trolls.
You're not empathizing with me.
Even the sparrow finds a place by your altar. Even the wanderer who roams. Even the fatherless is embraced by the Father. We're coming home, coming home. Sparrow finds a place by your altar. Even the wanderer who roams. Even the fatherless is embraced by the Father. We're coming home. They're coming home. Surrounded by friends and feast. The table is set. We will sit down, surrounded by friends and feast. Even the sparrow finds a place by your altar. Even the wanderer who roams.
shout out to, I don't know his first name, his last name's Tigalar. I can't spell it, even though I can pronounce it because Dutch immigrant in that way. I am really excited. I know I hate it when people start out. I'm really excited for today's show. Look at this. Already gifted memberships are out there already. So gobble them up. I'm putting more and more stuff in the membership section lately. If I have too many videos or I have videos that I'm not really too sure about, I just throw them in the membership section. And I just put randos in the membership section. So that one will probably come out at some point. But this is our Friday estuary, and we have a lot of, I got to adjust my camera a little bit here. There we go. We have a bunch of new faces today. And how do you get on this? Well, if you're a member of any kind, even a basic membership, usually on Wednesday or Thursday, I will drop a link in the notes and have signups. And sometimes I'll put some people in. So I got a couple of randos that came in for conversation, and they expressed interest in doing this. And so I wanted to bring them in. Now, next week, Friday, I won't be doing this because I will be at South Estuary, because that's coming up, and they've sold 60 tickets. I don't know if they have any more. I think if you get a ticket now, you don't get a free lunch or something like that. But if you really want to go to South Estuary, go to southestuary.com and sign up. You can probably still get in. I think he has overall capacity of 100. So I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be an estuary group leader. I got a note from Dave saying, are you going to be? I said, yes. That's the most exciting thing for me about going to these things is being a group leader, because to me, the estuary groups are where this stuff is really going on. So super excited for today. And as usual, I'll bring in, let's see, well, do I usually do it? Do I usually bring in the new people first or the old people? New people, old people. Well, let's bring in the brand new face to our live stream, Brian, twin brother.
Hello.
Welcome.
You've met my twin brother. Many of you have. Paul, I know you have. I'll meet you in person next week at South Estuary. So I'm glad to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for signing on. Tell us a little bit about you. Now, he and I are going to do a rando coming up, but just give us a little taste.
Well, I mean, the background of that rando coming up in a few weeks is, of course, the rando you did with Brad, which was a few weeks ago. And he has made a good introduction there to himself, and I look forward to doing that as well with you and setting up what we'll see what it becomes. But our conversation has mostly been in private over the past 5 to 8 years, however you want to cut it up.
Yeah.
And we have not seen eye to eye on religion and politics, whereas the previous 45 years we pretty much did. So it's an interesting scenario. He and I are both baffled at times, and he and I are fully engaged most of the time. We take breaks, but yeah, that's the background for I'm been on the corner some, mostly because of Brad's interest. And I mean, I've started following Jordan Peterson way back a couple of years after you did. And I don't remember when I watched my first PBK video, but I've been tuning in for a long time, mainly because Brad introduced me to a lot of the videos. But I ended up being on a video or two with Nate Heil at Grail Country. So that was a good, I guess, run at this, practicing presenting ideas, not just to Brad through text, but to the public. And I'm very, very thankful to be here.
All right. Thank you. I'm so glad that you came in. Let's see. Who should I bring in next? Let's bring in Paul. Paul was on not too long ago. You were sort of outside, and I think you're probably a little better situated. Why don't you give us a little introduction to yourself here today too?
So hopefully this is my wife's computer, so we'll see if this is working. If the mic, let me know. If I can always switch to the other thing. So I'll just do this differently. I'm an economist. I work in corporate, but a water heater broke, and there was flooding in between the walls, and so of course there's asbestos in the walls. So we have a huge reclamation project at our house. So I'm enjoying the in-laws hospitality right now. It's day over, and which means I get to work remotely for an extended period, and as you may have noticed, the economic data has slowed down, so I have a lot less to talk about on the work side. So anyway, so yesterday we went to watch a college volleyball game with all the kids and the extended family, and that was awesome. And then we went out on a raccoon hunt, trying to find some raccoons in the local area because we don't have those locally. And we found some raccoons, and that was awesome. And the kids all loved it. And we watched raccoons doing raccoon things. And so that's the other side of me.
All right. Well, thank you. I just installed new cameras at my house, and I have way more raccoons around my house than I ever thought I did. They show up at night. The other night, I was thinking about making some branding about it. I had this film of like 8 raccoons just as a flotilla just cover my lawn one evening. So I thought, oh, look at that. All right. And now I'm going to bring in 2 recent randos. Nathan was on for Rando's really wonderful conversation. Nathan, thank you for joining us. Any little short introduction to yourself?
Yeah, I'm a dad in Kansas. All my kids I have 4, and they fall into the 20s as of last week. So I see a crack in the door of solitude. And otherwise, I'm a professor at a state university and an academic librarian.
All right. And another very fresh rando, Collin.
Hi. I'm from British Columbia. I'm on Vancouver Island, and I'm working towards a degree in social work now to hopefully get into counseling one day.
All right.
Yeah. Found that out. Was my calling 15 years ago, and I've been doing it for about that long. Not the best way to find it or learn it, but yeah, if anyone's watched my rando video, it was I got started on Taylor Swift's website and wound up, giving advice to people, and some serious things happen to people that they're reaching out, and I found my way with that. But ran into Jordan Peterson from the start, and back in 2016. And it was about a year or 2 afterwards I came across your stuff, Paul, and found it very fascinating. Yeah.
All right. And if you want the bigger story, that just got posted this week. I wanted to, when Collin said, Nathan, I muted you because when a car goes by, the mic's picking it up. Mm-hmm. Actually, Brian's in a car. Cars make great recording studios. That's where the Freddie and Paul show started. But as with Nathan and Collin, if you sort of want the bigger disclosure, go to the Randos videos, because the Randos videos never get as much traction. But the truth is, that's where the real treasure of the channel lies. You have to dig for it, but it's in there. So, and last but not least, Jason Jonker, who has made the Friday live stream estuary regular. So thank you, Jason. Brief introduction from you.
Sure. I'm out in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm a chaplain to folks in recovery from addiction.
All right. And how we play the estuary game is we've just done our first round of introductions. Now our second round are pitches. Each person, you had a question, Allan? You're muted, so okay. So the second round are pitches. So each of them, I'm super excited about this group because I've randoed two of you. I've gotten to know Paul a little bit. I've gotten to know Brian's twin brother, and I've seen some of his stuff on Grail Country, and Jason's been on. So this is a really interesting panel today. They're all really sharp people, but they come at life from very different places. And so I'm expecting an amazing conversation today. So we'll see if it happens. You never know. So most of you who I think are on the panel know what to do. We're going to pitch an idea to the group. It can be something personal, it can be something intellectual, it can be something contextual, it can be something estuarial. And the key to a good second round is don't just comment on the previous pitches. You can pass or pitch a new thing, and that gets a diversity of things on the table. And then in the third round, that's where you can comment. You pick a pitch and you say, I liked this pitch, or these two pitches fit together, and this is why. And I sort of tally up which pitch got the most attention. And that's where we start the conversation, but this conversation never ends there. So that's how we do this. So Brian, I'm going to give you right of first pitch.
All right. Well, I guess I didn't know that was the introduction, but I'm a chaplain too. I'm with in healthcare, and I live in Charlotte, or near Charlotte, North Carolina. And my pitch has something to do with my relationship with Brad, and the thing I think about pretty much every day in my conversations with him. But basically, you talked about it on a video today, Paul, and that line between religion and politics, the relationship between the two. I will point out the video that I saw yesterday by that was on the Dispatch by Jonah Goldberg interviewing Molly Worthen. It was really good, and you have to listen close, but they really covered a lot of the themes that I really wanted to kind of take notes and write down what to talk about. But I think I can sum it up by saying I want to talk about secularity, and there are three types of secularity that Charles Taylor delineates, and it's important, I think, in any conversation about it to have them very clarified. The first one is that procedural and neutrality in matters of belief, just a kind of a sphere of sovereignty, where you can actually suspend your belief and interact with other people in a pluralistic society in order for the common good. Secularity one, that's what Charles Taylor calls that. Now, the second one is the more programmatic version of pluralism, where it is very much we call it, I think in our conversations here, more or less its own religion. It's the religion of the left, secularism as a religion. And it's basically, Western civilization minus religion. So it's the subtraction theory. We can talk about that. I wanted to quote you, Paul, because I think on your video today, you said that was, let me get this right. You said it was the secular clean room that's religion free and it's BS. So no bones about that one. But the third one, I think, is the most interesting and expansive for our community and our conversations. And it's secularity 3, which is basically observable conditions over the past 500 years in our society that have changed and in some ways challenge metaphysics. It's a shift in history, and it's the context of our belief that needs some attention, I think. I think there's a lot that falls through the cracks in our conversations because we're not really focused on what the possibilities are in a new epoch, basically. So, Paul, you, about a year ago, in response to Paul Kingsnorth, were observing that he was triggering all the right questions in that talk on at First Things. You also said there's no easy answers to it. And then you quoted Mircea Eliade, who said, "World's end." And there's that civilizational aspect of maybe of Christianity and of the West that is included in this third aspect of secularity. So I think that's probably enough of a pitch. There's a lot there. There's too much, really, and we won't talk about it all. But I'll see what y'all pick up on, and look forward to if we should we choose to talk about it, saying more.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Excellent pitch. Paul, what would you like to pitch?
I'm going to pitch Christian localism as a response to Christian nationalism. The fundamental issue is not the Christian part, it's the national part in how, and there's something about how media and how engagement has changed our interactions with the national since the 19th century. And the new media perhaps should refocus us on the relational, the local. So that's the core of the pitch.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Paul. All right, Nathan, you're muted, so you have to unmute. But what would you like to pitch? Uh-oh, is he frozen? Either that or he's taking a very long drink. I think we will move to you next, Collin, and we'll see if we can grab Nathan if he gets his internet back.
Okay. Trying to think here. I guess maybe it would be like how to navigate movements, because there's always the issue where we need things like movements, we need to get things going to work on stuff, but the danger always is that the movement takes on a life of its own. It develops a spirit, and that spirit wants to perpetuate itself. And I remember years ago on a military forum, there's a Floridian guy, and he talked about the Save the Manatee movement that started up in like the early 70s. And by, I think, 2008 or so, the government and like biologists declared that the manatees were saved. And you'd think that the Save the Manatee people were like happy about this, but they said this was a big conspiracy between the government, Fish and Game, and scientists, and the manatees were more in danger than ever. And you have to think, if you were like someone your age or younger, you probably got into the Save the Manatee movement when you were young. You spent your whole life in it, and now it's saying your life's work is obsolete. But more than that as well is the egret, or whatever you want to call it. It's saying like, I don't want to die. And then there's the paradox with the movement where the spirit of the movement doesn't want to realize its telos.
Excellent pitch.
Okay, thank you.
Really good. It looks like Nathan's long drink is over. So Nathan, what would you like to pitch? Oh, now his smile is perpetual. It's funny. Our internet connection was fine when we randoed. So he's moved inside the house, possibly for a better sound or better internet or what, I don't know. Can you hear me, Nathan?
Yes, I can. Sorry, I just realized that across the street were 3 AT&T trucks working on lines. Sorry.
Demons and AT&T trucks. I know it.
Hopefully it'll be fine inside, I guess.
All right, Nathan, would you like to pitch?
Sure, yeah. I actually wrote down some notes because I've been wanting to pitch this to this corner of the community or whatever for quite some time. I'm going to have to turn on a light, which will make it weird. But my pitch was about like the experiential conflicts between ideas of participation in the world or the cosmos or whatever, and concepts of providence. So it's been a while, but I think I've been wrestling with this for a few years. But then the last few months, the end of the summer, I have more time. So I feel like I've listened to less than half of 1% of what this little corner produces. But I found that it gathered a lot of things that I've been contemplating for a number of years. And then it was during the summer, I can't remember, probably when Jordan Hall started using a war metaphor, something like that. And then being able to listen to more of the group talks rather than like individual ones. Okay. So under participation, I have like models, frames, ideas, ologies, metaphors, like ways we think we might be participating in the world, I guess. And then if I move a swatch over, it's like faith and will, or the war metaphor, or how we think about atonement, or is our participation in the body of Christ or the world, how we form communities, symbology, like how we interpret all human interpretations, basically, universalism, ethnicity, and cultures. And what I'm finding is that when I think about participation by listening to people talk about their experience of participation, that as soon as it becomes structural, it feels like we're building towers of Babel, like ways to secure or be safe or find truth, but human up, right? Like confessional, liturgical, like all those feel a little bit like we're building a tower toward God that we'll feel safe within. So that's on the participation side. Then in the middle of that, like about 5-6 years ago, I started this process. I think it was probably because of COVID and we were home for a year teaching. So I had more time for quiet. And so I started using any times I had off, like, anyway, to be silent, at least for like the morning till noon or something. And then slowly I started to just read through, I guess, the ascetical writings of the church and just repeat. So like the Philokalia, or basically ascetic writings, desert through the Syriacs, like St. Isaac, and then just do it again. And I'll use whenever I get open hours, plus George MacDonald's unspoken sermons. And then probably principally, to be honest, or what pulled them all together for me, is just Kierkegaard's slim sermons on lilies of the field and birds of the air. And then personal experience were something about that being, started to make me recognize when I flutter inside, like or have disturbance or anxiety between when I'm at rest. And I have an icon wall. I occasionally am Orthodox. And when I would look up at like the Pantocrator, I always felt, like say my kids or my parents or a student reach out to me, if I looked up at that, especially if I had a flutter, I would feel like that face back to me was saying, do you love me? Do you trust me? And when I would, obviously my answer is, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. I do and I do not. And I can tell by how I feel inside. Anyway, so that's where the providence piece came in. And then with my work with the sciences, especially biology and chemistry, and then that grasses and lilies and birds, and I was like, well, I can have all these thoughts that build structures that try to reach something, but then actually I can't have all those thoughts unless I be. Like I'm equally dependent as the infant and the lily and the grass, as air, light, water, earth. I can't build anything unless I have that, which I have utter dependence on. And so that's what I meant by providence, like that it's just gifted being, that I have nothing to control. And then as I've listened to these group discussions, I just have been inflamed by this. It's what kind of brought it to what would you say, like it's not clarity at all. It's more like experiential potency or something of, I want to know from all these people, like, how is that experiential complex of dependence and what you can do with once you have being and build, how that interacts. So, you've got all those things, like these models and forms and structures and ideas about what might be the way to be in union with the cosmos or God or whatever. But you can only have them because it's already been given to you to be the kind of thing, and then when you listen, it sounds like wind through grass, or the way the colors align at sunsets, or the way the insects act. And I'm wondering, among all the community, like, how do these inform each other among all the things you're doing? And then I would add the word perhaps, which I always do. Like, I guess for me, the struggle is, it's felt very personal, the query of, I guess it's just almost been like a word that my body feels when I'm nervous about a class or when I go to a meeting or anything. Like, providence doesn't do anything to me like theology about providence, but more like, do I recognize my dependence? And I've just wanted to hear from like everybody I've listened to. Like, what is that relation for everybody? Thinking of doing whatever they can do as a human, but also recognizing that they have nothing to do with being human.
Yeah. Wow. Excellent. Thank you, Nathan. Jason, your pitch.
All right. So I was thinking about the video that you did on the Ozempic lady.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly in the beginning of the video, she starts getting some positive consequences from her 60-pound weight loss.
Yeah.
And she's immediately upset about it, and somehow just couldn't take the win. And that reminded me of your car ride with your grandparents, where your grandmother the temperature needed to change every 5 to 10 minutes. And that reminded me of when my wife and I wash our truck. And when I leave the car wash, I'm like, truck looks better. And between the car wash and home, my wife has found 5 things that are still wrong with the truck, which reminded me of Jordan Peterson saying that women in general, statistically speaking, are more neurotic. They experience more negative emotions, and they kind of scan the horizon for threats and things that aren't right. And so my question to the group is, what the heck do I do about that? How can we handle that in a godly way? And what is my role when peace like a river doesn't flow through my home.
I think in the pitches today we've had two eternal questions posed. One of them, basically between being an agency, and the other, what to do with a woman. And I think neither will be fully answered in all of human history. So the pitches certainly did not. Boy, I'm super excited. So I'm going to pass because there's plenty on the table. Brian, it's going to be tough today, and I knew it would be. This group has not disappointed so far.
Well,
Which pitch caught your attention?
I would say Paul's primarily, but man, I can relate to all the three, and I think the other three will certainly be able to fold it in somewhere along the way, perhaps. I will choose Paul's because I have actually come in thinking about it this morning. Localism and relationality is kind of like politics. And I know that's strange to say, but if we have this line between religion and politics, I think I am of the persuasion to mix it up a bit and say that politics can be and should be more local, and it can be and should be more relational, and it's more concrete. It's where the rubber meets the road and when it comes to practicing our faith. So in our religion and maybe in our worship and in our practices, and as various people from backgrounds and denominations, and even in I guess how we think about our faith, it can get kind of lost in, certainly it can get lost in politics, and it can get lost in the left brain, but often also gets lost in idealism of our own choosing. So as you say, Christian localism and relationality as a response to Christian nationalism, I think that fits very well with what I wanted to talk about today. And I like how you put that, in that I just think it's a controversial, perhaps, way to say it, that that politics is the thing. Relationality in politics should perhaps have more influence on our, I don't know, how we practice religion. So my summary that kind of brings these together is to say that I think, and this is what I've said to Brad several times as we have talked about our differences, I'm like, it's not that I just want to be political and it kind of makes me change my theology. It's that we, I think, lack a good political theology and a good theory for how church and state relate, or how religion and politics relate. David Brooks had a column on this where he talked about the very thing. I think there's a lack of it. Molly Worthen pointed to the fact that our spectrum is truncated when it comes to evaluating our range of options for how the two relate, as Americans specifically, as opposed to Europeans or Canadians. So that gets to the epoch thing. So it was a pretty clear choice for me. Thanks, Paul, and the rest of you for your pitches. I certainly have experience of wondering what to do on that truck ride home from the car wash.
Very local pitch that Jason had. Paul, what would you like to point to?
I'll point to Collin and movements. I think movements and institutions are a tension that we should break open and talk about. I'd love to respond to a lot of Brian's stuff, but I'm going to pass it to Nathan.
All right. Thank you. Nathan, what would you like to point to?
Well, the only two I have notes on are Ryan and Paul. So I missed Collin and Jason.
Well, Collin pitched the fact that movements beget institutions and then they perpetuate themselves. We want to save the manatees long after we're going to have to move them out of our swimming pools. And
like
Jason pointed out the fact that
women are a mystery. I cut that part.
Yeah, and we talked about women in our randos, so you have a
like Kansas weather.
Kansas weather.
Wow, that's a tough one. It's hard because I like Paul's about I feel like setting up things like localism versus nationalism is a participation choice or a participation navigation. I think I'm really interested in Collin's about, like the living piece, sort of like grass growing, and then you make it a field and start to harvest it. that's and what you pointed out this morning about the Ross conversation with that's got that same thing. Like there's a liveliness to it that is in the providence of God, and then boy, I'd like to use that in some way or other for my ideas. So I'm going to go with the movement institutionalized. Collin,
Right.
I think.
Very good. Collin, what would you like to point to?
I actually found Jason's quite fascinating.
Let's see. I believe you're the only single man here, so
Yeah, I was thinking that. But,
I'm single.
well, I find women quite fascinating, and like compared to them, men are like really simple mentally, like psychology, and they can be more complex than they would let on. It's just I've noticed like one of the maxims in counseling that I've noticed over the years is like women talk too much about their problems, and men don't talk enough about theirs.
All right. Okay, Collin. Jason, what would you like to point to?
I'm going to point to Paul. And do I need to elaborate on that, or?
Sure, please do.
So I think a lot of times when we think of that local versus national thing, it's coded liberal, the shop local movement and all of that. There's a word that I'm going to mangle, though, from conservatism. I think it's called subsidiarity, which is a subpoint of conservatism where it can have a little less egalitarian valence to it, that perhaps those who have much, who've been given much, need to give much to those in their community. But I think the idea of acting locally is something worth considering, and how that relates to the national scene.
All right. Well, I'm going to point to Paul as well. And there are certainly streams of many others, and Paul sort of won the vote. Collin's a second, and I think many of these issues will probably start to intertwine in them. I have been, for the last week and a half, been consuming 19th century history of the end of the Papal States and found it absolutely fascinating. And I think it is a lesson in what Paul is talking about, in that the people who are actually under direct papal jurisdiction and the rule of priests seem to really hate it. Priests made for lousy mayors and judges, and because priests were just doing everything. And the people under it were just ready to be done with it. But the 30,000 foot level questions about this is the Vicar of Christ. Why wouldn't you want the Vicar of Christ ruling over every aspect of your world? And the politics that happened in the 1948-49 revolt in Rome and the Papal States, and then the 1849, and then the 1870, because France hightailed it out of the Vatican, and Italy was mostly put together at that point, except Rome, and they were just wanting to finish the job. And the Pope is thrashing around looking for the Austrians or the French, or won't someone come to my defense? And the answer was no. And you have this massive turning of, and what you said, Brian, in terms of, part of what made 1848 such an explosive year was telegraph was just getting going in Europe. Railroads were just getting going in Europe. One of the things that the Pope previous to Pius IX was against was street lighting and railroads. He wouldn't permit it in the Papal State. Then Pius comes in early on in his regime. He's like, yeah, we'll do street lighting. Yeah, we'll do railroads. But very quickly, he began to recognize that railroads and street lighting and telegraph was building a momentum that sort of pushed us up into higher registers. And he first thought he could compete at that level, but then learned he couldn't. And then in the 1849 revolt, the propaganda that the Pope was putting out was foreigners and radicals have taken over Rome, when it was actually the Romans who had been basically sick of it. And his regime from 1850 to 1870 was basically propped up by foreigners. He needed foreigners. And then when the foreigners basically said, the French were getting their butt kicked by the Prussians, the Austrians had already lost to the Prussians, they're like, sorry, we can't afford your religion anymore. And then the Pope, until his concordat with Mussolini, he becomes the prisoner of the Vatican. And I mean, this history, which I knew nothing about, is just wild. And it has everything to do with this question of, and just my response also to Paul's, if anyone wants to know what local social media looks like, get on nextdoor.com. You think Twitter is a hot mess? Nextdoor.com. Oh, because it's one thing to throw bombs at your Twitter adversary. It's another thing to bitch about your neighbor. So
or your neighbor's kid that took your package, and they're basically calling for a public execution of a 12-year-old. Yeah.
So Paul, you win. Why don't you flesh out a little bit more, and then we play.
So when I was in school, when I went to elementary school partially in Europe, and the 1840s were a major, and it was in Austria, and it was a major part of what you learned about in like high school history class.
Really?
Yeah, that was a major. It was memorable. I remember it now, and it was all in German. And but I think there are things about the American story that we are, like, the Civil War is very defining in how we think about ourselves. In the 1840s, obviously the Napoleonic era, but then also the 1840s are a defining in how the European nation states observe themselves. And all these things are technological, as you alluded to. The European, the Catholic system of bishops was designed as a fractal distribution where you had someone to go to that you could actually get to help decide local religious issues and sort of manage this interface of politics and religion at the level of the city. And like the Holy Roman Empire was really just a bunch of city-states. And so as the technology changed, like today, Gospel Simplicity did something on the papal encyclical. And I haven't even read it yet, and I'm pretty darn Catholic. So I'm reading some Protestant's interpretation of a papal encyclical that I'll probably peruse at some point, but that's not how the fractal structure of the Catholic Church or really medieval society was set up. And so this nationalization, I guess, why am I talking about this? This nationalization sort of set up where we are today, but it was unidirectional to a large extent up until recently. And now it's bidirectional again. So pop psych or pop anthropology take here. I think our brains, largely our brains as men, are wired in such a way to engage in politics and want to solve things and want to get things done and to work together as a team in order to cooperate to solve problems. When we nationalize the conversation, we are then trying to solve like I talk about the Federal Reserve all the time at work, and I'm better positioned than 99% of the population, and still my opinion doesn't matter at all. And so I am in a situation where I want to go solve problems on like, these are interesting problems. I think about them a lot, and it doesn't matter. And we have this innate desire to engage in politics, that is to work with each other, to argue out these ideas so we can come to a common solution. And we want to fight it out. And like Nathan is like probably a good example in the comment section there. He wants to fight out like we're going to have this conversation, we're going to battle out. And at some level, it doesn't matter. We don't matter at the national level. But our Christianity should matter at the local level, and we do have agency at the local level. And in building our church, I think we have the right instincts that we should be engaging with each other. We should be taking our Christian views into the public square. But the public square that we need to be taking it to is the school board or the neighborhood group, or even what is it? What's the neighbor site?
Nextdoor.com.
Nextdoor.com. Yeah. Take some charity to nextdoor.com and say something nice about your neighbor's garden. You know, I think there's a poison, which is the nationalization of this political instinct. And the solution is to not reject the instinct, but to bring it to the right fractal level so that it's effective.
All right. Go ahead, Jason.
Go, Jason.
You're muted, Jason.
There we go. A question or maybe a reflection, but are you saying basically that looking at things on the national stage is sort of like pornography? That it captures our instinct for something, but it's this, it we use it then in this way that has no ability to actually be fruitful, and it's tempting to us, but it's not actual real. Is that kind of what you're saying, that it
Pornography,
we get stuck into it, but we can't, it doesn't do anything?
Yeah, that's 100%.
Well, there's the title for a video. I appreciate your idea, Paul, because I see this in church all the time, and I'm thinking, I'm really anxious to talk to Brian because I've talked to Brad, and lately Mark Parker's been sort of on a tear in the corner, and it often strikes me that all of those admonitions in the Bible are face to face. Take care of the widows and orphans. Take care of the homeless. Take care of the sick. Visit the prisoner. And we sort of jump that to prison reform, or and again, what's been brought out in our national politics for a long time is this often invisible but subtle transmission of taking care of my neighbor means if I vote for this particular party, then I expect the government to care for my neighbor so I don't have to. Or my neighbor needs a level of care that I can't provide, so that there's a transposition where my politics now, it's almost like instead of, unlike, let's say, a state church in previous centuries where my tax dollars go to the church to support the church. They still have that in Europe to a degree and in certain ways. I don't have to take care of the poor because I pay my tax dollars and the government is going to do that for me. But as a pastor, I would tell them, you're going to derive different spiritual fruit yourself if you actually come into community with that homeless person or that poor person. But I struggle with this. Let's say the case of Freddie. I can use Freddie because he's been on the channel plenty. And Freddie has lived by Social Security disability his entire adult life. And on some, that's kept him housed and fed, but it's also continued to disable him. And so one of the things that I've seen is that this sort of gets into Nathan's point about agency, that whoever is actually applying the agency, that's not neutral. And, when I would work with Dominicans and I would talk about these work teams that came down, because work teams would come from Canada or the United States and they'd build a church or they'd build a parsonage, something like this. And the nationals would just think, well, these are very wealthy people up in North America and they have comfortable, secure, prosperous lives. And so what is it that they come down and help us? And in many ways, that I can think of a Spanish word, because I talk about the DR, I switched to Spanish, but it depreciates the gift that I knew that these Canadians and Americans, they were giving sacrificially of their time and of their money so they could go down to the Dominican Republic and help these people that could really use help. And eventually I figured out with the Dominicans that I told them that these North Americans were selling things from their house to raise money for their church. Now, in American terms, that sounds weird because we do a garage sale because we have so much stuff, we just got to get it out of the house and maybe we'll get a few bucks for it. But if it doesn't sell at the garage sale, we're going to give it to Goodwill. But the way Haitians and Dominicans manage their money, because pesos were so unstable, once you got any money, you bought something right away and you kept that TV or that radio. And if things got bad, you sold that TV or radio to get the money to help out with the bad thing. And so when I translated it to that North Americans were selling items out of their house in order to raise money for your church, they're like, oh, well, we just thought that in North America, money is just everywhere and it flows. And it kind of is. So there's your point about local and what should we call it? Disconnected. in terms of this agency question, the phenomenology of agency, which is I think what Nathan was talking about, that's huge for us.
Can I put in one caveat for the chat?
Sure.
There are people, like the principle of subsidiarity, there are things which are proper to the level of the national or at a higher level than the local. But my sense is that for the vast majority of people, that is not where they live. And so I don't think that we should, there is, like, I'm not saying discard national politics altogether. I mean, as a Christian living in society, or as a human living in society, you're probably more likely than it's a probabilistic statement. More likely than you're not, you are positioned in a place where you are better suited at the local level. Does that nuance come through, Paul?
When I work with homeless people, I see a ton of government interaction. And whereas some of it is beneficial because some of their problems are governmental in nature, I often see real binding that because you're working on a level of policy, and all of these policies are well meant and sometimes effective. But I also see this disconnect between the donor and the person, which is why when people see all the homeless people around my church, they say, what should I do about the homeless? Stop and talk to them.
Yeah.
Develop a relationship. You can't handle all these homeless people. Develop a relationship with one person and work on that relationship. And you both will be blessed through it, even though the truth is you're not going to save their life, probably.
Just to add to that too, and I think a ministry can be a mediator between the donor and the person in a way that the government can't, in the way that the Bible tells us to share all good things with our teacher. We can share back the good things that are happening to a donor in ways that the government just, it's going to be a pie chart or whatever about what they're doing. That's a really cool thing about Christian ministry, is that reciprocal nature of it. Yeah.
Nathan, go ahead. You're muted.
Well, that last thing you said reminded me of just yesterday. I had a class, like public libraries. So I'm the state university library, so I'm also public. And a lot of what we do is shelter the homeless, honestly. And it's so much what you said, Paul. Like if I have a class of paying students, I'll also let all the homeless members in the building sit in on that have interest, right? But it's, librarians are kind of like a ministry between the government and the populace, where, I hadn't thought of that before, but when you said it, I just realized that like yesterday, 8 hours of the day was both dealing with listening to people that said, I left my bag over there, I got to get this, can you watch my water, can you, right? Can I use the bathroom, can I stay overnight? And students that are paying too much, and faculty that know that I wish I could give them all the information they need, but we're stuck in these corporate agreements about who can access what. It's like a little nexus viewpoint, probably like a church, I guess.
Okay. Go ahead, Collin.
I can't help but feel a lot of times when people talk about topics like this and all that, they're looking for an ideal solution and there really isn't one. And I think of that in the sense that, like, mainstreaming things, it's kind of like Bilbo talking about being spread thin, like too little butter on too much bread. And that's the reason why anybody who's a fan of something, you quickly learn to hate when your thing becomes mainstream. It's like as soon as like the UFC and MMA really got getting big past 2010, that's when I checked out of it. And I've noticed it's something, it's not my thing, but I know a lot of people who are interested in it. Like the wargaming thing, Warhammer 40,000, you probably never heard of it. That's a lot of fascinating stuff if you want to dig into it, Paul. But it's getting in that period where it's going to get mainstream, and the community is aware enough of it that they're really upset. They want it to be their small little niche thing that can be its thing and not get dragged out and become bland. But as you touched upon, Paul, localism isn't all like sunshines and rainbows. It concentrates the feuds. Well, I know that where I live, there's only one highway that connects to the rest of the island. There's another logging road that's like a 6-hour detour that's really rough, and like people die every so often driving it. And we had a forest fire a couple years ago that burned down, cut off the highway for like 2 months. And the big family in our town are the Colsons, and they have their fingers in a lot of pies, but they have a fleet of planes and helicopters that do forest fighting. And everybody in town was like asking during this forest fire, like, why are the Colson planes not doing anything? And it's because our province hates the Colson's guts, and they refused to sign them up to a contract to fight a forest fire like 20 kilometers away from where their airfield is. They were sending planes off to Australia and California. So yeah, everything's lovely when you think about it local, but then it gets like really nasty when it doesn't.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason why we want to mainstream, to spread out the thing. Like Trump and Elon Musk, oh, they're not friends anymore. They had a falling out, but now it's like affecting your entire country. It's like, should it be that way? And I was thinking too, with how monarchy tries to kind of make it a balance with the local and the mainstream. And depending on how things go, that can be like really good, or it can be like really anachronistic. And I thought about like Alexander I after the Napoleonic Wars. He really wanted to crack down on revolutions and other stuff. And he basically said to Europe, and like, the Russian army is at your service. Like, he looked to the King of Spain and said, like, no, your American colonies are in revolt. You have the Russian army. You just have to ship it over, and we'll fight and crush all of these independence movements. And that only, like, that went nowhere, because the British looked and went, oh, you'd have to do that through the Royal Navy, and we will shut off Spain's access to the Americas. And Spain was like, stop trying to be our friend, Alexander. Like, we have a chance here. Like, we don't want the Royal Navy getting involved. So, like, and all of his other actions, he wanted to like create like basically a new Christendom and get Christianity involved. And like, even the Pope was looking at him like he was an anachronism. They're like, we're not going to agree with you. Like, this is really out of touch. And in some ways you can kind of understand why they would think that way. But at the same time, it's like the guy was really trying to tackle with matters, and everybody just wasn't in sync with him.
You know, it's interesting because people very quickly think it's either or. But one of the things I loved about our conversation, Collin, and your story, your story shows how, I mean, on one hand, you've benefited from elements of, I mean, the Canadian social safety net is far more generous than the American social safety net. You've benefited from those Canadian social safety nets. You've also seen the downsides of those systems. You've benefited when your extended family took you and your mom because your dad, didn't pay the mortgage. Yeah. Your extended family reached in, but it's not an either or. And like you said, you're going to have to send me the reference to that book, because it's exactly these kinds of issues that I'm so fascinated by, because the French basically, when Pius IX fled Rome to Gaeta, the French were like, we'll take over Rome again, we'll put you in, but you have to have a constitution. Pius said, no constitution. I'm not doing a constitution. And he basically he basically blustered the French into it. But you're right, it's all these levels, and we've been, for the last couple of 100 years, we've been negotiating all of these things. And the difference between a constitution and a monarch is that the reason the monarchs didn't want a constitution is they said, we don't want human rights. And it was, to those who are like looking at Doug Wilson, one of the little tiny things that he said that I didn't pick up in the video was, he said, there's no such thing as rights of men. And it's like, there's that monarchism right there with Doug Wilson, for whom you shouldn't find any monarchism in Doug Wilson, but there it is. Go ahead, Collin.
There's more than that too, because it's layering something else there. With one of my courses for a lecture, we had a guest speaker who's this native lady from one of the local First Nations. And I found it interesting because she was trying to relate about how them reclaiming their culture, their children, they should be what they are, what we've always been. But then whenever she'd talk about that, then she'd say, and they have human rights. And eventually at the end, one of the other students spoke up saying, like, well, if people should just be what they are, why do they need human rights? And she was like, I don't know. But then it's like, you could see where as much as she's wanting to reclaim her people's heritage, she also has Western thinking in her mind where it's like, human rights are the good thing, so we have to have those. And whether she likes it or not, she's very much a hybrid of those two things. And I would say, even though like there's a trend within a lot of movements within the Native community to like, even the radicals that like hope one day to like expel all the hundreds of millions of non-natives from the Americas, which like, it's not going to happen. Like, it's never going to be a thing where they're going to be able to separate those things anymore.
Yeah.
But
Nathan,
everybody's in that same boat together in their own ways.
That's right. We all
Can't
are.
unring that bell.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nathan.
Well, I feel like we take as baseline things that we have the capacity to build, right? It would be like if a wasp starts from their wasp nest rather than from being a wasp. So that almost all the time in these conversations, we're already starting with the thing that we had the capacity to make as the kind of being we are. But we don't think under that of what kind of being are we? I don't know. Like all of our terminal, I was just thinking about people that come in that speak different sounds, which we call different languages, but they're humans making different sounds. But you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
When we talking between the Orthodox or the whoever's language about God or whoever's language about land or local or national, those are all already like tertiary or even beyond levels of talking as humans or making sound or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So Nathan, we're sort of fully integrated culturally. Like the language I speak influences my grammatical patterns, which triggers how I think about things. Like when I'm thinking in German, which I don't do much anymore, and I'm thinking in English, let's say this: when I spoke German regularly, my English grammar changed as a result of heavily speaking German. And there's a reason the German philosophers are a certain way. And so we have this like, there's this, where's German in the cultural layer, or where's language in that cultural layer? Is it mere utterance? Is it deeper thing? So it's there's this deep integration. And so like what broke is really what changed, I guess will be more neutral, is the shape of our social networks resulting from technology. And I would say like we have this social network that does the same thing as language. It goes from way up here to way down here, and like at a hormonal level, it's there. But then something shifted, and we're in relationship with a much broader social group, and then I feel like that's where what we're trying to. I mean, that's why pornography and national politics are the same. It's the same issue of now I have access to, instead of where my brain was designed to be here. Not my brain, but my vertical stack. That was really philosophical, but I'll ping it back to you, Nathan.
Well, are you saying that you need to organize that, or is it just proliferation of a species? Like, I totally got you with how if you learn more languages, your own languaging
changes.
I would say proliferates, right? Like the capacity of thinking about how to sound to another, or it's sort of like psychology. If you learn these layers of theories of, or religion, of practice or whatever, then you're just proliferating capacities as a thing, or a happenstance of being. But I don't know. It's the other piece of like trying to structure that stuff into a contained space that you feel safe. I think that's what, like when we try to make distinctions between localism and nationalism, like those are, if I could make a choice that I should be more local, or I should be more national, or I should be evangelical, or I should be liturgical, those are the places where I want them to make proliferations, and they happen to naturally. That's why perhaps is always as it occurs, is my general feeling about truth. But I'm curious what comes up in the others about, boy, would I like it better if I had a equation rather than a opening.
Brian, I want to get you in this because you haven't spoken much, but I see this, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I see this as part of the puzzle in terms of, I mean, when Brad came to me at Midwestuary and said, I want to do a project with you, with my brother, because we're identical twins and we've lived parallel lives, and then sort of Trump pulled us apart. And I see so much of this Trump moment in terms of, I see families, I see people splitting up because of something as far away as the president of the United States.
Yeah, and thankfully there is this mechanism I think most of us have, at least with our families, to where the split ups don't happen. We just stop talking about politics and religion. I very much recognize what you're saying as a part of this. Brad's and my difference is relationality. We're talking twins from the womb, you know. You don't get any more grassroots and local than that, right?
Nope.
But then you've got Trump, the president of the United States, the leader of the free world.
For 8 years.
Yeah.
That's it.
And I think I'll say the positive side of it is we're still talking.
Yeah.
And I think the negative side of it is we're at a sort of an impasse, but still talking. And that's actually why I'm here. That's why he did the randos. That's why I'm doing the randos. And I think we may think about how to format a third one where both of us are actually talking like we usually do. I think he is good about this, and I am game for it, integrating into our ideas and ideology differences what our differences are from family of origin experience, because that's where it starts to diverge, right? Twins being born. I mean, I was born first. He was born 23 minutes later. And
Did he have
even
your
in the womb,
heel?
Yeah, I was holding on to his heel.
that is not documented, but I wouldn't doubt it. I don't think I have a birthright, but I'm watching out for it. He's coming for me, I'm sure. I just think, I mean, you've set up the question well, and sort of framed it with me. I mean, as we're sitting here talking about it, I think about Christian nationalism, you know, papal authority over a free world, if that's, you know, sort of the mashup we would describe it as. Religion and politics sort of mashed together, and people at grassroots level fighting about it. I don't know how to connect this thought, but I'll just say I think the most important thing is from either the lower or the upper, the local or the national. The most important thing is imitation. That's the strongest influence. How we act, how we behave, how we treat each other, how we our language, how we speak. This is the most salient and important thing. I mean, the ideology is going to work out or it won't. But if we don't treat each other well, because imitation is both. Bad behavior is imitated and good behavior is imitated at both the upper level and the lower level, the local and the national. So I think it's one of the things that's on my mind as a pathway or solution. Certainly, dialogue is one thing. I think that's the theme of South Estuary. Uh, the practice, what we're doing here in Estuary, and just being there and showing up and hearing from each other our ideas and our lives and connecting in this way. Although, you know, uncovering differences, it's very important to do it. And so dialogue is key for me, but I just keep thinking about imitation as we're sort of setting up this expanse between, you know, how do you bridge the local and the national. I think that either way, it actually, I mean, Jonathan Peugeot talks about it in terms of fractals, you know, the structure or hierarchy or the reality, the symbols, and redemption itself, the logos fractals down. But it's also from the bottom up where there's a response to it. And I think that is imitation. So I don't know. I'll sum it up by saying that imitation. I don't know
It's
what it means
interesting
to
that
y'all.
it's interesting you have love of God and love of neighbor. And
Yeah.
you can draw a parallel here with this. You know, it also strikes me that I look at a number of people who are, and I'm not talking about anybody in the corner, I'm talking about people completely outside the corner, who are so in text, in messaging, they are so vocal and strident about the stuff up here. And in actuality, I see them practice nothing down here.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because our estuary, our Sunday morning estuary, the pitch that won is a common pitch right now where people are feeling troubled and disconnected because all of this national chatter, because everything's sort of coming apart. And I remember one person, he's not a guy who comes to the church at all, but he said, you know, what really helps me is when I go and basically I go and help out at Loaves and Fishes, which is sort of the homeless shelter. I go and do this thing, and then suddenly I settle down. And I was listening to on Mark Parker's channel, Mark from Tbilisi and his wife. If you haven't listened to the episode on Mark D. Parker's channel with Mark and his wife from Georgia. She has this near-death experience, or whatever you want to call it, and she sees this tree, and again, as often happens with, okay, we're sending you back because you haven't completed your task. And she's like, well, what's my task? And then she discovers this is during the collapse of the Soviet Union and this mess. You have all of these orphans. She gets involved in helping an orphanage down the road. And they weren't really orphans. Their parents were homeless. But it's, again, so often when I see people just set their hair on fire over national politics, I want to say, okay, I don't care what you believe nationally. Well, all I would ask you to do is get deeply involved with someone on the ground. It can be homeless, it can be substance abuse, because what I so often find, and Jason can speak to this, I find so much wisdom at that local level, and people at that local level, they've got their opinions about politics just like everyone else. But to me, very often, if you don't have the credibility down here below, I'm a lot less inclined to hear your ideas about, how you think the big picture should be run.
Paul,
go ahead, Paul.
Can I reemphasize that if there's cancer in the body, it's not, your brain function doesn't matter that much. You're gonna die. You have liver cancer. It doesn't matter that your head's all right. So why the emphasis on local is because it seems like that's what's dying. That's where the source of the cultural cancer is. It's the breakdown of that level. And so, do national politics matter? Yeah, but it doesn't matter if our communities are cracking and falling apart. Like, Jason, have you been to Cass in downtown Phoenix?
Oh, one of the most unpleasant experiences of my life is picking up or dropping off people there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's where they put all the homeless people in Phoenix.
Oh.
It's like a block. There's an agency there, but it's kind of this block of just the concentration of every human misery you can imagine, with a bunch of fentanyl and meth mixed in.
When I used to volunteer at the Andre House down there every Wednesday. This was a long time ago when I had fewer kids. But it's if you go
just
to a place
through it is like it does things to you.
It's absurd where we are culturally if you go to a place like that. And there's nothing that the federal government is going to do to clean up Cass. It has to be derived from the relational commitment of some of the most holy people I know are down there trying to work and trying to make it happen. And I am not in their ranks, but I think that this is no, it's not that we think that national doesn't matter. It's your point, Paul. There's so much sickness at that lower layer of the fractal. All right, I'll pass it to someone else.
If I could go back to what Collin was saying about these folks that had the ability to put out the forest fire, but out of personal bitterness and whatever, we're just not even going to use them. And I think the great advance of the nation state was that it got rid of some of that tribalism, and it brought in professionalism, and we have to do things the correct way, right? But what the internet has done is it's now split sibling twin from twin down two separate rabbit holes. And it didn't just bring in tribalism, but it breaks down families into these technological tribes. I'm guessing, I don't know, but I'm guessing the difference between Brian and his twin probably came with different internet rabbit holes, being the imitating that they're picking up on. And that's I'm guessing that was part of that wedge and how we saw Trump so differently. So it has this unique ability to break down the nation state and the family and everything and create this weird technological tribe.
Go ahead, Collin.
One thing to also keep in mind here is American culture, and also the fact that, especially because the internet, like the world's becoming more American. I see that especially because we're like Canadians are the ones that get it the most, and we've kind of fought it the most. And we even have a whole like department of the government, the CRTC, which is to regulate Canadian content specifically to weed out as much American media as possible. But with the internet, that's not possible. People just go on it and completely bypass and look for the American stuff that they want. But keeping in mind your leanings, you guys are very factionalistic and you love to fight. And pretty much all throughout your history, there have been these moments, usually wars, when you guys just separate into two groups and go at it. And this is something that like Canadians saw from the beginning. And it played a big part about how Canadians try to be the good, peaceable government that we have. And there's even, I'm not sure if it's worth reading out, but I did a thing about kind of Canadian cultural leanings and how we express ourselves and how we become like the total 180 in war and nasty. But I read a book for that, and as I was reading through, it was things going back centuries of Canadians talking about Americans, and if you didn't know what dates it was published, you would think it was talking about Americans today. And I always think of Americans like ferrets. They love to wrestle and fight. And if you don't know ferrets, the way that they can get really wound up fighting, you think that they're like in life or death situations, but they're just really rough and tumble. And then you separate them and they're like, what are you doing? Like, we're playing here. And of course, I know that analogy only goes so far when people are getting killed, but still.
I think it applies to twins.
Yeah.
I mean, we very much see it as a hobby. So I don't know. Maybe it's sometimes more upsetting for one of us than the other to be to witness our others, our twins, indiscretions or inabilities to see things your way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's playful, I think, at times. I think you'd say the same thing. It's just sort of it's what we do. I mean, we're twins. But it's gone on so long that it's time to open it up to others for conversation that will help us, modulate our own trench.
Yeah,
Well,
glad
that's the
you
thing
talking.
where if the arguments and all that, even if you're like butting heads and all that, so long as there's an element where you can feel like you're generating mutual respect rather than contempt, I think that's a healthy thing. Because I know with my family, ever since I was like a little kid, we'd passionately debate about stuff and like nobody's opinion was budged. But at the end of it, it was like, I respect the other one for like holding their ground rather than like just bowing their head. And yeah, even like with my mom, she loved having opinionated kids. So
Well, it strikes me that the connection also gets to Jason's pitch, because when I think about that, when you talked about ferrets or twins, I think about that Buster Keaton short where this husband is smacking his wife on the street, and Buster Keaton comes up to, he's going to save her. So he smacks the guy and he turns around and the wife smacks him. I mean, there is there is something to that. And the opponent processing happens between human beings. And even though the the distribution is identifiable between men and women, the dynamics can be very much the same. And so, whereas, I really like the analogy of pornography that you use, Jason, because on one hand, yeah, national politics is like pornography, but married sex is, and then, I did the Ozempic thing, because one of the things that you learn, and now Nathan said he's single, we should probably say he's divorced, because that's a very different category, never married. And because one of the things that you learn is that in a marriage over a long period of time, and part of the reason I really like that New York Times piece about Ozempic is it gives a chance to bring out some elements of human community in the open. And if there's any area of challenge that human beings have, it's marriage between a man and a woman.
Yeah, that was sort of what brought me to intentionally hope, like during the first Trump administration leading up to, we'll say, 2019, and listening to Jordan Peterson that same year and recognizing, hey, this, movement and attention gathering around Jordan Peterson and his stand against the left, characteristically, caught my eye, of course, because there's a part of me as a reasonable human being that goes, yeah, he's right. But there was another part of me that thought, I'm not sure that's the whole story. So I sat with it for a while, and I started to put it together in my own mind and thoughts over that year. But somewhere along there, I thought about back when I had read Charles Taylor's book, Secular Age. He mentioned Rene Girard, and I didn't study him very much at the time. He just kind of used him as an example. I'm not sure how many pages covered Girard's theory. But I remember sitting in my backyard going, this is a real problem, this polarization that we're in this country and in this family. And I thought to myself, didn't I hear somewhere that you have to have a common enemy to really find unity? And that's basically Girard's thesis of the scapegoat. And it's dark, but it's also, I think it rings true. And it happens a lot in domestic disputes, from what I understand. When the cop shows up, they both turn on the cop. So, yeah, that story's true. I don't know what would happen in each of our marriages and relationships as we think about such things, but certainly at the national level, jumping way up there, I associated this with I think the movie Pearl Harbor was coming out around this one of these times. I was thinking about this. That we need a purpose, and it was this time of malaise back in the the early 40s and late 30s. The nation was in this funk of malaise and needed purpose. Well, we got it with the war. So a common enemy, it does kind of bring unity and identity to a nation. But theologically, from there, where I go is, okay, so what about the human race and the kingdom of God? What is our common enemy there? It's not flesh and blood. So it gets into a lot of theology from there, but I'm just pointing it out that our need for a common enemy is natural and understandable, but it can also tear us apart.
Well, it strikes me, when I reread again the Pacific War, it's a remarkably strange thing that, yeah, it was a devastating attack at Pearl Harbor, but what it cost America and what it cost the world for America to join and win both wars, it's an incredible thing, way out of proportion to what America lost in the attack. it's really an interesting dynamic. Go ahead, Colin. You wanted to say something? And then Paul.
There's also the aspect that, like, a common enemy can unite people, but also on a deeper layer, like a crisis strips away like luxury beliefs and other things.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of casual, like, I would say a big issue we're dealing with today is that we don't have a big enough crisis. Like, as much as people talked about like how bad the pandemic was, it was like compared to like the Spanish flu, that was nothing. And like an example with kind of luxury beliefs and opinions and stuff, I think a big thing that happened with the Holocaust for a lot of Christians, especially in North America, was when it finally came out that this is what happened. They were like if that's what people who hate Jews do to the Jews, like, maybe I don't actually hate them. And if I don't, like, then why am I being prejudiced towards them? And maybe, like, I should just try and like do a clean slate thing and approach them neutrally as if nothing else has happened, especially people in North America to do that, ignoring like thousands of years of history between Christians and Jews. But there was like that genuine desire of like, okay, like this is a wake-up call. Like, I shouldn't be thinking this of people.
But it has to be bad enough.
Yeah.
Like the event has to be bad enough.
Mm-hmm. And we always find ways of keeping it from being bad enough.
But the foundation when you go into the crisis matters. So I'm thinking back to Holland's book, one of his books, and he's talking about how the Christian community versus the pagan community handled the plague. And basically, Christian community would stand by their people and nurse their people to health, whereas the pagans would flee and dissipate and just and leave their sick alone. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that was good for Christianity. The survival rates are much higher among the Christians who are nursing. And I mean, it's using biblical imagery. It's the purifying fire of the crisis. It doesn't keep everything. Stuff burns. And I think that the COVID situation was incredibly damaging for people who did not have strong roots. And it hurt us, even those of us who had roots, it challenged those. And so part of the way that the crisis unifies is it just decimates some opinions. I would say that would we face a Spanish flu well in 2025? Do we have the social structures to hold ourselves up in a situation like that? Which is, I think, why the localism is, and the universal basic institutions I discussed last time these are key. Where are we grounding ourselves so that we have anchors during these sort of situations? Because plausibly the next crisis just kills us, and just takes us all out. I mean, and hopefully and that's where we rely on salvation in our faith. But I'll pass it back to you, Paul, since you have.
Well, when you say kills us, what is us? Because what happens in Italy is this certain form of the Roman Catholic Church gets killed, but a new form sort of emerges. And the human being us's keep getting replaced by other us's later on. But then you have the question of, I mean, part of what killed the Roman Catholic Church was Italy. And when Pius IX early in his term says, "God bless Italy," it changed the world because no pope had ever said that. And language-wise, Italy was a patchwork. And some still argue today Italy continues to be sort of a failed state because they can't actually unite. But go ahead, Colin.
That's actually what's been talked about here, kind of, I see a silver lining in your guys' divisiveness. Because I think, I know like one of the big impacts that a lot of people in Germany, especially Christians, had was like how united the Germans were to the degree that they were going along with the Nazis. Yeah, you can pick out these people that like opposed, but by and large, they went lockstep. And even when it came to
Because they're Germans. That's what
I
they
know.
do.
I know. Even like when it came to like trying to get rid of Hitler, well, an attempt only happened once it was clear the war was lost. If they had kept winning, everybody would have kept going along. And then there's that thing within American history where, like, as much as people can focus on the evils of slavery and all the things that you guys have done, there's always been this strong current from the beginning where there's this good slice of your people that are like saying this is wrong. Like I know with the what is it, blacks at the start, like at the beginning there was that compromise where a black vote was only like 3/5 of a white vote.
Yeah,
They
3/5
weren't
compromise.
votes. There was population count.
Okay, well, whatever it was, but the whole thing people go on about is okay, they were like valued less, they had less representation or whatever, but they don't realize that like getting that compromise almost split your country in like the 1790s. And it was because enough people were like, no, like we can't exclude them. And I feel like that's an underappreciated thing. But,
All right.
do you know more history of it, Paul, or do you want to go into it?
No. Let's do final comments, and then, in all fear and trembling, I will drop the link, and we will let the ocean into the estuary and see how that goes. But first, I want to thank all of you for volunteering to do this today. And again, I was not disappointed. This was tremendous panel, tremendous pitches. Any one of those pitches could have really produced a super interesting conversation, and it was. And maybe we'll go around in order. Brian, final thoughts.
I was hoping you'd go the other way. Give me a second.
All right, I'll go the other way. We'll start with Jason.
All right.
Jason, can you give final thoughts?
Sure. I'll end with a final story. I went to an anti-Trump rally because my daughter thought it was important and just kind of went as a neutral observer. And to your point about people who get very, in the national whatever, there was a group of protesters that were shouting shame, shame, shame at the people who were walking into the Trump rally. And I knew one of the guys who was going in there because we had gone canvassing houses the day before, and he had met with this family that wasn't going to attend our church because I already had a church, but got them air conditioning in their house, which in Phoenix is like life or death issue, for the amount of money they had, because he called his son and just got it to happen for them. And I was thinking of these people screaming shame at the people walking in there and going, none of you has done something like that in your community. You're just out here proclaiming how righteous you are, sort of like the Pharisees being viewed for their praying. So I'll close with that.
All right, Collin.
I'm just thinking about how quickly things can change in a zeitgeist, and how even within in the past year or two, how there have become some things where people they're not even topics that either side in your polarized culture even want to talk about them. And in a way, it's kind of you can take solace in that, but at the same time, I kind of find it frustrating where people can be so passionate about things and then the next day it doesn't matter to them. And I know that was a big thing within World War II, was World War II killed eugenics, and eugenics was the thing everybody was for that was anybody.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was oh, eugenics? What's eugenics? And it's you were for this.
Very true. Very true. Nathan.
Oh man, I'm just grateful. I just love hearing people or humans or whatever come forth. Like this is very. I don't know what to say. I love hearing people.
How was your
from
phenomenology of
all
agency
layers
during this talk?
Oh, it's so good. Like it just feels like I engage full whatever they are, and that I love all the aspects that we're trained to think about ourselves coming forth as they are.
All right. Thank you, Nathan. Paul, your last thoughts.
People are really complicated. Institutions are really complicated. And I guess my pitch was in a lot of ways just meaningful participation. Where can we get the meaningful participation? And I'll just echo your point, Paul. Love of God, love of neighbor. If you're not theistic, love of some eternal good and love of each other are inseparable. And while we're staring up at the ceiling, looking at that thing above, we're not seeing what's happening right around us. And our relevance realization, to John Vervaeke, this is being manipulated in a way that is against our common good. And thank you for talking about my pitch. It's very humbling when that happens. I would much rather have talked about Collin's because his stuff was really good. But I'll defer to you guys on that. Thanks.
All right. Brian.
Well, it's kind of a question because I think I've got this phrase right. Did you use the phrase opposition processing?
Opponent processing. Yep.
Opponent processing. Yeah. Well, that's a rich framework for me to of course, as twins. I mean, that's the grassroots level, and then Girard's theory way up high. But I immediately put everything together about if we can't fix our country, it's probably a good indicator. I mean, a good reflection of the facts that we can't fix our marriages either. So, how do you deal with difference in a way that maintains unity and doesn't use that scapegoat mechanism to kind of perpetuate the violence of human society, the discord that fractures something else? I mean, you can focus on the positive of that. That mechanism resolves attention for the party who scapegoated, but for the scapegoat, for the victim, which is in our case half the country who's wrong, right? And in the case of war, it's all those people in those countries or that country. So there's no winning. The larger scale we get, and to just be able to reflect with you all, it's embodying the process of dialogue and imitating Christ, the gospel, to just give each other the time. And appreciate, Paul, your format that you provide here for us all to do this, and look forward to more. Sorry about that. With the group, but also, with Brad and I joining the larger community to talk through some of our differences. I think a lot of people will resonate with the way we kind of represent left and right.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. I super appreciate all of you showing up here. Jesus tells us to, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another. And he also tells you to love your neighbor as yourself. And so one another sort of feels like one after another. Neighbor is that, the sort of this unknown rando out there, or maybe it's the person next door that you're really annoyed with. So go to get nextdoor.com to really flame. And you're exactly right, Brian, how I read this years ago in a book that people are not problem. You're exactly right, Paul. We want to solve problems, but people are not problems to be solved. They're people to be loved. And, there's this viral moment with this. California has to pick a new governor. This is going to be really interesting. And I just realized the ballot came to my house, and I'm going to have to do my homework and decide who to vote for. And, a lot of people would be dissatisfied by the R or the D behind the person that I'm going to vote for. And I'm not going to tell you. Those who are closest to me probably can guess. But I have no idea which person with an R or D I'm going to vote for. And so I'm going to have to do this research. But one of the questions that got so much reaction, the reaction got all the attention, but the question she asked was, because the way it works in California, you have this huge ballot, and then they take the top two, no matter how much they got. And so it's probably 2 Dems, but because there are like 8 Dems and 2 Republicans running, it's possible they could be 2 Republicans running. And then you think, how are they going to get along with the legislature? Oh, boy. And I mean, it's just sort of crazy the way this thing works. But the question was to this Democratic candidate, how are you going to appeal to the 40% of Trump voters in California? And she basically said, I don't give a shit about them. I'm not going to try to appeal to them at all. But it's like, now wait a minute. I know we have this big imagination that California is only Democrats live in California. 40%. I remember, because we used to have elections here at Living Stones, and then they have this tally that they put there, because of election transparency. And so I could go and look at where all the people around my church who they voted for. And it is not majority white neighborhood at all around my church, at all. Whites are maybe 30%, and there's a whole lot of people who are not Anglos that are in that 30%. And I was like, yeah, I think Trump was 35, 36% of the vote in the neighborhood, a third, and 40% in California. And it's like these, and why I love Brad and Brian's, willingness to sort of bring this out and process this here, because these are our spouses. These are our children. These are our people in church. And Living Stones, even though I think part of the reason Living Stones has never been divided over politics in our church is because Sacramento is a political town, because a lot of the people that go to church here work for the state. And when it comes to state politics, they're they've worked under Republicans, they've worked under Democrats, they've worked on everybody. And they're just sort of like, they come and go. And even if this person was of the opposite political party, I didn't like them for these reasons. And if this person I liked for these other reasons. And so again, this idea of how are we supposed to navigate this? There's one word, and it's love. And like we talked about, it needs to go all the way up the stack. I'm not going to say don't vote your values. Do vote your values, but address your neighbor with love. That's what Jesus says. So there's my sermon. All right. So thank you all for being in here. I am going to let them in, and here they come. Now I only pay for 9 slots. So I'm sorry for those of you who have tried to get in here. And if someone drops out, then you can try again to get in. but I'm going to take you in order. Oh, go ahead.
Should we leave, like, so other people can come in?
Yes and no, because some of the people might want to talk to you. So I'd say just feel it out. And if you get to the point of like, I've had enough of this, then go ahead and leave.
I just didn't know the rules or the protocol.
Yeah, I've got a hard stop at 12. So if I leave, I'm not leaving in disgust or protest or anything.
I could slam in the door. All right. Alex, you were the first one in the room. What say you?
Well, I had hoped that there was more conversation as far as the conversation between a man and his wife, or the difference of sex, because I mean, yes, we were talking about differences in politics, but the practical, to me, always gravitates more, because I mean, this is how we do life. The practical is how we do life every day, not just on election day. So, and then, but what the twin Brian said, as far as when it comes to war, no one wins. No one. I don't care who wins. No one wins. If there's someone that I'm not getting along, or even with my spouse, if we're fighting, no one's winning. So, but anyways, I do have difficult conversations all the time, and sometimes they're unavoidable, just because it's part of my profession. I signed up for it, and that's what I do. But also, sometimes I want to be in it, because sometimes it's because I want to be there. I'll give you an example. I'm one of 4 boys, and we all think different. And when we were kids, we used to box. We no longer box. We no longer box. We now have conversations. And you know what? Never have I once thought, okay, you're not my brother because you think differently than me. I want the best for them, even if they don't see what I see, even if they don't believe what I believe. I still love them, and I still want their best, what's best for them. No one wins in a war. No one. So, in a relationship, in my experience, now it could be off the mark because I'm Hispanic, so my wife is also Hispanic. So in the Hispanic culture, there is such a thing as machoism. I came from that culture. I firsthand experience, and same with my wife. So I've learned, and I'm still learning, that when my wife has a complaint, when my wife has a difficult day, or whenever she disagrees with what I'm saying or what I think or my preference is, I do the opposite of what I want to do. Now, at least now. So I want to talk and I want to give my fix, but I've learned to not do that. That's the last, now, as of today, that's the last thing I want to do. And I just keep hearing her. And I might ask more questions about what she's saying and to clarify. And then I might even post a question, what about between this and that? But, not saying that that's perfection, but it works better most of the time than when I want to give my opinion. Say, wait, hold on a second. Let me give you my fix. Let me give you what, and that. But anyways, I don't want to ramble on too much, but yeah, in the war, nobody wins. And the people closest to you are the ones that get hurt when you are impulsive and defensive and you just want to lash out when you're angry. So there's a time and place. And when you're angry, be careful. Be careful, because the ones you hurt most are the ones that care about you most. If I'm angry at a person that I've never met and, they don't care, but people that I hurt most are the people that care about me the most. So there's a time and place for everything. Just beware when you're angry. Just beware and try to do whatever you can to hold back your tongue, because it will get you.
All right. Thank you, Alex. Allan.
Hey, everybody. What's going on? Alex, as someone who grew up with 2 sisters and a mom, girls fight in their own way. I can guarantee you that, But
yes,
yeah, what I wanted to bring up is it has to do with the Ozempic video, and the fact that PVK stole my video title. But I think that because we always talk about relationships and coming back to these relationships, and I think what really, really intrigues me about Ozempic is it's this fast track way to raise your status. And I think that when things move slowly, we don't really see how the mechanisms work. And when they move fast, you suddenly see the mechanisms at work. And it's actually funny that Paul's on this. I think Paul is an economist. So it's like, if we map out our relationships like their transactions, it kind of makes sense of like, well, if my value is higher, I can demand more from you and provide less to you because my value is, I have more money, I have more value I'm bringing through my looks. And so I need to provide less value in other ways. But that just means we're just all of our relationships, including our marriage, is transactional. It's just like, what am I getting versus what am I paying? And because we're seeing the water go out on, a lot of big-bodied people suddenly becoming small-bodied people, and we're seeing in fast motion instead of slow motion, the values change, you're suddenly seeing like, oh, I can treat my significant other like shit, and no one's really going to say anything because I now have more value in some other way. But I think it's just, which is a fine way to map it. And in some ways it's like not even immoral because it's like, well, if you can find a new spouse that treats you better, that you like more, then why don't you leave your current spouse? It's just, in economics, it's like, they do it all the time of like how things match up, how buyers and sellers meet each other. But it's showing us like, well, you were never founded on love. You were never founded on any principle other than what you can get for what you can give. And I think us like actually like pausing on that moment and realizing like, okay, transactions are fine in some ways. When I go to the grocery store, I don't want to, buy a product because I feel bad for whoever made the product. I want to buy the product because it's a good product. But when we have relationships, do we view those people in the same way? And now that you're seeing these changes, it's like, yeah, like suddenly people are like, why is that happening? Isn't that strange? It's like, well, it's not really strange if it was just transactional to begin with. What's strange is loving people and how do you be with them when they can't just be a transaction for you.
All right, great. Any comments on Allan? All right.
I would just say economists are much more skeptical of utilitarian frameworks than you would think. I think because we have to do all the coursework around utilitarianism. And it's a functional predictive tool, but it is not. I find that there are many Christian economists who use it as a tool and not a moral framework. There's something to say about game theory and repeated games and commitment and things like that, but that's really boring, so I'm going to move on.
Well, since you mentioned economics and status and stuff, there is something to be said about the current advertisement, the way things are expected to be desired, right? And marketing and advertisement plays a big role because now psychology is involved in what is to be desired, and we can't escape it. And so, and like Allan was saying, careful because there's a distinction between products and people. So, but there is, he says something about how our perspective of what is to be desired could be had because it's deeply involved in psychology aspects of what is to be desired as in things instead of people.
Oh, I just wanted to say something about Paul's comment because being in the university for 10 years or whatever, I kind of thought all business majors were quantification oriented, and I keep encouraging people to do economics because it's more like the cybernetic ecology, right? Like it's anyway, I just wanted to say that have also noticed that I find complexity will occur in economics, how it won't in accountancy or finance or real estate or.
Interesting. Eric Hamilton.
Hi, yeah. I just jumped in like, I don't know, 40 minutes into the whole stream, and then I watched it back like at 3 times speed just so that I could catch up with you guys and make sure that I actually knew what was happening. But something that really, as I've been ruminating on, silently during the discussion, is the idea of, and I don't know who said it, but the idea of essentially big government, or the idea of being ultimately concerned with national politics, as you can say, as pornographic in nature. I think that that's actually, I can't fathom how true that is, or how true that feels to me, because I even thought about like the fact that if we're defining pornography in that sentence as like the idea of a simulation of something that is genuine and important, but you're acting like you're participating in it, but you're not truly participating in any fruitful function. I think we live in an age, and this is a redundant statement, but trying to extrapolate broader, we live in a pornographic age, because I thought about the Ukrainian girl who was stabbed on that bus. And I thought about the fact that she was not assisted or helped at all. And I just think how many people on that, like I asked the question, like how many people on that bus watched the Avengers in theaters? Like they were able to be heroes vicariously through the screen. But when the opportunity arose for them to be a hero, and I'm not saying they could have saved her life, I guess I'm just saying the idea is that like a moral moment where there's a villain right in front of you, no one was Captain America in that moment. And I just think like the idea that we live in an age where it's just like, I don't know how we got structured or formed in such a way that it's like all responsibility actually is like at levels that like I can't do anything, right? Like the idea is like there's nothing on the ground level besides when it's time for me to get outraged. When it's time for me to get outraged, that's the time in which I like have all the moral agency in the world to actually take action, right? And anyway, I thought that was really profound.
Action happens in typing or voicing.
Exactly.
Those are the actions.
Well, and yeah, and then what you brought up the point, right? You brought up the point, Paul, about true religion is caring for widows and orphans, and within James's day, he's writing that, not saying therefore donate to your local nonprofit. You know what I mean? Therefore, sit in your cushy, living room, typing on your iPad, saying submit that $20 to your local nonprofit. Right? It means getting your hands very dirty, and being the Avenger, being the Captain America in that moment that you can be when those opportunities arise. And so yeah, I just thought that was really profound. How the you could say the epidemic of pornography, what is at the heart or root of that is a sort of simulated act of I act like I'm participating in reality when I genuinely, and just sort of passing that responsibility off to some people. And it's funny because I'm old enough to remember when the conservative movement, like 5 years ago or 10 years ago, what I think probably pre-COVID, was all about personal responsibility. I don't really hear anybody talking about that as much anymore, at least on these like big name, big tent conservative movement anymore. They don't talk about that as much. So anyway, that's my piece.
And it's also the case that if you actually build a relationship with a person who's struggling in just about any way, the last thing you will feel like is Captain America. And the one thing you will probably recognize is, gosh, how helpless am I? And you will probably have a vision. Many people who start at the local level do become activists at another level, because from the bottom they can see structural problems. And so again, it's not an either or. Yeah. But if you're not informed all the way through the stack, and none of us really can be fully, because let's say you become specialized in, one thing that I became very specialized in was the life of one one Mormon homeless man who was bipolar. I became very specialized in his life, and my own ministry started in the Dominican Republic. And one of the things that I learned so thoroughly there was I was so helpless, and there was this discrepancy of wealth where I thought, $1,000 can make a huge difference in the life of a person who lives on 50 cents a day. And you know what you learn? It can and it can't. And you would think, just multiply that out, because you think, wow, $100,000 would make a big difference in a life that's there. I wish Jason were here, because if I would give a junkie on the street $10,000, I have a fair idea what would happen.
Mhm.
And I don't know I would have helped. But again, go ahead. And Collin, I love Collin's story, because when you listen to someone for 2 hours sort of map out so many of the complexities in his father, his mother, family of origin, situation, you see the combinatorial explosiveness there. And then suddenly we're back in Nathan's pitch, where is the line between agency and providence? So go ahead, Alex.
So Paul, what you said is exactly right. And I'll give you an example that some people can relate to. If you take anybody that requires training, so a paramedic, in their training, when they're getting ready to graduate, they think they're ready until day one on the job, and then they realize, holy smokes, there's so much I got to learn, right? The doctor, they think they're ready until they're on their own for the first time. The firefighter, they think they're ready. They got all this training. They think they're ready. Day one.
The teacher.
Whoa.
Yeah.
But so in a sense, when you don't know enough, you really are overconfident, right? When you don't know enough, you are overconfident until day one, and you realize, I'm gonna drown. I got to keep my head above water. And it's only as you do the doing that you realize there's so much more I got to learn. And you still try to figure it out. And you still try to figure out, because when you're dealing with people are complicated each and every time.
Which is why love is it's the logic of nuance. And anyway, I'm sorry. You got me preaching.
Would you say?
I'm preaching.
Sorry. Yeah. Well, would you say? This is speaking to the Doug Wilson thing, which I watched your video this morning, Paul, about his interview. Yeah. Well, the one thing that keeps me from radically, well, maybe not the one thing, but the thing that actually makes me feel like Doug is a serious person is the fact that he says this is a 500-year plan, and we do it through personal relationships. And I'm like, okay, like, I can't argue with that. I guess I am very localist in my opinion, but I guess sometimes I wonder, like, when Paul is Paul the Apostle, when he's planting, his churches, where does he think, like, if we try to psychoanalyze him a little bit, like, where does he think those are going, or what does he think those are being built up into on the earth institutionally? I think that's a really profound question. So. Yeah. Did he have a 500-year vision, that sort of deal, or did he think Jesus was coming back right then, So
he knows one thing. He says that the believer receives as a down payment the Holy Spirit. So there was something that he knew as far as what time would look like. Because for people, but God will be God, and things would be better if we only understood that we are not God. We do not control everything, and we mess things up when we try to control everything, including the conversation with the ones that love us the most.
All right. Nathan, you win the stream with a puppy. I mean, we just can't compete with a puppy.
It's true. He says that democracy is important and you should all go and vote. That's what he says.
That's because he's a retriever. He's a good dog.
All right. Do you have something else you want to say besides the puppy? Oh, there's another dog. All right.
Only I mean, a lot of the conversation at the start, right, was about, I guess, various conversations that I've been a part of recently about the relationship between politics and Christianity. And I think that a view of Christian ethics that states that sort of it's important to be civically engaged in an appropriate way, right? So that means taking responsibility for voting, encouraging others to vote, encouraging people to be informed about what they're voting on, and also calling out like bad things when they happen. Like those are all appropriate. It's the like if it takes over your life or something, right? That's a different sort of thing. And it's possible to say to some people, I think, maybe you're being too nihilistic or jumping off one end of this too far, and the opposite end of that isn't either to only devote your life to that to the exclusion of everything else, right? Or the other accusation sometimes is like that you're pursuing utopia. You can say no, like things can be better, but they're not going to be perfect or something. But as a side point, Thomas More's book Utopia is actually a Christian book about a Christian society and how it could be better if people sort of lived out Jesus' ethics a little bit more. But yeah, so I'll rest my piece there. Gromit got bored of me and you.
All right. So. Love the puppy. Love the puppy. Thank you, Nathan. Brad, both twins are here on one stream. Thank you for jumping in, Brad.
Yeah, glad to. Thankful to be here.
Maybe Brad and Brian are the same person. Look what happened. When Brad started talking, Brian disappeared.
Oh, boy. That's ironic. I was about to mention Jordan Hall, and he said, when I saw Jordan at Midwestuary, he said, how will I know when I get to Southeastuary that I won't be talking to your brother? I mean, to you instead of your brother. So that's going to continue because I won't be there. I wanted to jump in and mention something Jordan Hall said to Grim Grizz a couple of weeks ago. And it's this local, global conversation. By the way, I enjoyed the conversation today and the pitch we listened to y'all talk about. Y'all did great. But I wanted to just mention that what Jordan said to Grim was that he said something about gardening and how we need to get local, and how when we're teaching our children in the future, we will be not letting, because the internet will be less of a thing in our life daily. He said we won't worry about telling our kids or even knowing ourselves that there was a bombing in Somalia today. And I just want to point that out as a thing that has changed probably more intensely since the cell phones, smartphones came to us, and 24-hour news cycles, which happened way before that. And the rabbit hole thing that someone mentioned today, and how that's what divides us, I think is the case. But it's like we can't go back to when we didn't have all this access to everything, unless there is some intentional disciplines that we learn to live by. And what Jordan Hall was talking about, and he's continuing this, I love the idea, is I've heard it from other people on the corner too, but the 5th generational warfare is what we're up against. And I'm pointing it out because C.S. Lewis was in World War I. And I heard this mentioned the other day on Socrates in the studio, but they were talking about him and Tolkien and the influence or the impact of World War I on their writing, which we've all benefited from, and how they made the choice to go ahead and to write. But what Lewis did was, I'm sure World War I was in their immediate memories and in their tissue memories, and their heartbeats would come up when they saw World War II coming, or in the middle of it. They were physically present in their past, but they had to make a choice. What will we do about it now? What's my agency going to be? And Lewis chose, it said they were talking about how he decided in church the next Sunday after hearing one of Hitler's speeches that he needed to write screw-tape letters. So where's the war? The war, or where's the culture war? And I do believe that Brian and me are in the same room, the same, we had the same womb, same upbringing, but just like the left and the right in the country, we're all sharing a space. And it's not so abstracted when we talk about the president, and I don't think it's not so abstract. We really are talking about, here's a series of things. I'm thinking about fifth generational warfare. Hiroshima and Nagasaki made war come home to all of us as something that threatens all of us everywhere, and that was illuminated more vividly in the Cold War. The Cold War is what probably triggered the sexual revolution. That's attacked all our families. There's the issue of fear when it comes to, say, the more recent elections, about what's coming across the borders and how might it affect me when I go to the grocery store. Who's coming across the borders? The COVID shot was an issue around the time of right after the 2020 election. So I think fear, and I think you mentioned it, Paul, recently, fear is a big factor in this. And what we're afraid of, we usually don't really have to be afraid of.
Yeah.
But I think most of us we're not convinced that we shouldn't have a little bit of fear that how this presidential election, for instance, turns out might affect my health and well-being or my community in drastic ways. So I kind of want to push back against the staying local idea. We are needing to stay local and focus local, but I think what you were saying earlier was our agency has to be local. And the agency we have is like Lewis deciding to write screw tape letters instead of, wig out about another war coming. He looked at the more urgent war, which was the one I caught, like what Jordan said to Grimm was, it's fifth generational warfare, it's spiritual warfare. So I maybe, just maybe, and I'm just putting this out there, maybe it is all coming together right now in history for one time at least. Maybe not for the first time, and hopefully not for the last time, but my heart rate goes up, or my anxiety level goes up in talking about politics. Should it be that way? No. Is it that way? Often, too often, yes. But especially because my best friend and my twin brother has such drastic difference of opinion. So I don't have any answers here. I'm just pointing out the fifth generation warfare issue may be more a factor. But I really like the spiritual warfare thing because we're taught that that's what we can do something about. On our knees, praying every day, learning to live locally, and staying focused on the thing that I know I can do something about instead of wigging out about all the rest.
I have a question.
Sorry, go ahead.
I have a question, and this one's for PBK, since he is a pastor. When it comes to spiritual warfare and what it might mean, I know that in certain perspectives, and this is not to divide, but as a serious question, if one interpretation is that the devil's bound for 1,000 years, and the all millennials say, well, that's been ongoing for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. So my next question is, if that was a allegory, right? Fractal, it repeats. What about the other section as far as when the devil is loosed? If it's a metaphor or an analogy, at what point does it become like, maybe we're at the next phase where the devil is, the 1,000 years are pretty much, going away, and now the devil is back at it again. The influence, the spiritual warfare. This is a question, not to say that I have the answer, because I have no clue what the answer might be, but just since you're a pastor and he was referring to spiritual warfare, I figured, well, why not? PBK?
Well, the Amil approach is a way of understanding the millennium symbolically, and understanding that we live in a time of mixing. And it's not that the enemy has been bound and finally conquered and put away, but it's also not that the enemy is just completely destroying one of the interesting things in reading all of this papal history from the middle of the 19th century has been how so much of this language is used, because the Pope had absolutely no qualms about speaking in just the most dramatic terms about, in saying God is doing this and Satan is doing this and you're in league with Satan. And it's like, yeah, he you know, even a lot of people who are shocking on YouTube seem reticent as compared to a lot of the language employed there. So I don't know, Alex. I don't know. But I tend to think along the lines of what I've said about the day of the Lord, that the day of the Lord is fractal. The New Testament is deeply apocalyptic. But when you visit someone's home where a car accident has just, or a heart attack in the case of, you know, I look at my sister and brother-in-law when my sister died of a heart attack on the floor of their home watching the evening news. That was deeply apocalyptic for my nephew and nieces. Mm-hmm. They lost a really wonderful mother whose participation was deeply needed, and there isn't an interaction with them that goes by, and I don't think and wonder how different their lives would have been with their mother's ongoing help with their various challenges. And so, you know, in some ways, when my sister died, the devil was loosed. But there's also this weird thing so often that it's so often when evil comes, God figures out ways to bless even through that. And I see that, you know, I was reading 2 Samuel with David and Bathsheba, and then of course the son dies, but then David consoles Bathsheba and sleeps with her again, and Solomon is born. And I was talking with the group about this strange way that the Bible just works through narratives, saying that this ball of pain and loss and drama and despair, God has this way of working through it so often in mysterious ways to bring good. And so, yeah, I can't answer those questions. But there were a couple other people who wanted to talk.
Paul, do you mind if
go ahead? Go ahead.
I'm going to stir the pot. And Nathan, you just bring out some good questions. So, so voting is both too much and too little. It's from the perspectively, you can't perceive enough to make a good decision in voting. The information isn't there, or it's too costly to acquire, and the complexities are just large. And so to put that level of responsibility on each member of society is a huge burden of democracy. And we don't take that seriously enough. We're putting this huge responsibility on each individual by having this democratic process. And at the same time, it's too little, because it's very cheap talk in a lot of ways. You go in there, you do your 10 minutes, and it has marginal effects of zero, and you don't actually do very much in doing it. So it's too expensive and too ineffective in a lot of ways. And this is why I sort of pivot to, there are more effective things that will change people's lives, which we talked about for the last 2 hours. So I think I struggle with I struggle with just go vote. And I even am a little bit cringy at go vote, because I'm asking someone to take on a huge mental load and something that's well above beyond their capacity when we ask them to do that. those are not decisions you can make well.
Can I give my rhetorical response just to that last thing,
Sure,
which is
absolutely.
serious first? The rhetorical.
That's why I set up.
When did Americans become so weak and so lazy, not wanting to take responsibility for themselves and do a bit of hard work? To the actual points, I think I agree with you that it's a big responsibility. I think in my political views, society is sort of held together by a whole bunch of ethical obligations that people have towards one another. And I do think in a democratic system, there is a big responsibility that the state has to educate people, right? That the wealthiest have to ensure that the poorest in society are able to flourish as well. And so I do think that democracies start to fail when those sorts of things break apart. Also, when there's not freedom of press, when there's all sorts of ways that this can go wrong. Where as we see now, when information is controlled by social media platforms who might disincentivize people from caring about the good information over the bad, it is a big demand on people. I think that part of that is about encouraging civic participation throughout people's education. Scandinavian countries do this really well. From a very young age, they encourage debate and critical thinking in schools, which does get people more civically engaged and gets them to form more complicated opinions about their values and reflect. Also teaching concepts like statistics, for example, how to identify propaganda. But all of this can only be achieved when there is, the means to have that kind of education system in place for people, right? And I agree that when a society is fracturing apart and you're not providing that democracies start to fail. I mean, that's exactly what I think we're seeing.
And I think we have like 30 or 40 Scandinavian size cultures within the United States. And to answer your first question, I don't think the system was initially set up this way. It was much more representative. And that goes back to the initial
I've got
debate.
my gripes with the founding fathers. I mean, I sort of think, personally, I think that Britain should have just given America, representation, and that would have all been much better. I think that there were some wealthy white people protecting their own interests, and they wanted to construct a society that would make their property interests, even better. And they built a mythos around that. Some good ideas in there as well, politically and ethically.
Well, you Brits sent us all the white people. It's your fault we're white.
I agree. And the black
come
people
on.
as well.
Alan, go ahead, finish your thought, Alan. Then Eric wanted to say something.
Okay, I'll shut up.
No. I think to myself, thank God I live in an age where I have AI to synthesize all the information and tell me how to vote. So anyway, that was a joke.
I was actually looking. I was watching this thing with because I haven't looked at the ballot yet, and I was looking at all of these people, and it's like there's 8 Democrats and 2 Republicans on the ticket. I have to research each one of these, and part of me. And so I've got this text chat with all of my kids, and they're all going by.
Right.
And of course, I play dad kids. I'm just going to let AI pick my candidate. Of course, my children.
Oh, good. Yeah. Right. No, it was a joke. On a more serious note, on a more serious note, the thing that I wanted to say was in reference to something that Brad had said about screw tape letters, and how at the end of that book, it's actually to the detriment of Uncle Screwtape and Wormwood that their patient dies in the war, right? So like it actually subverts their plans that he's the one that got away from them, essentially. And you convinced me just on another level that C.S. Lewis was a prophet, because now we don't fight many hot wars anymore. And so I just think that's really interesting in regard to fifth generational warfare. So
yeah.
I'd recommend, all of the politics around, again, the 19th century papal states. You don't have newspapers, but they post these things on the walls of Rome. But when you read it, these questions of democracy versus monarchy versus, rule by clerics. And it's so interesting how, the clerics can come into the Jews were, actually physically locked in a ghetto. At the same time, the Pope is trying to get this massive loan from the Rothschilds because the Vatican treasuries are bare. And you just read this history and it's like,
I find it,
many of the things we blame for our misery.
Right.
It's like,
Right.
They were around before we had those things to blame.
I find it very interesting that people in the, and I don't say that people derogatorily, I just mean people in the Peugeot pipeline, they see like the medieval world as like the ideal state or something like that, which is a world of serfdom, right? And in our democratic republic, we speak of serfdom as like this great evil of past, whereas there's sort of an argument or a discussion as to like, is that genuine? Because if you're a serf, you're tied to the land. You don't have to worry about all this stuff. You have representatives in a local body that comes up the local, civil magistrates, and it's like, and you just didn't have to care as much besides the borders of your. And then I think to like Hebrew insulas where it's like, Chorazin and Capernaum, and like you just have these like little like cities, and you just. And we don't go to Rome, we stay insulated, and I don't know, it's all very interesting. I don't have much to say beyond that, just sort of pontificating.
And you realize when you read these things how much the world has changed.
Yeah.
I mean, a serf, if you look at someone, they probably know a little bit about how to grow, and then you read, let's say, the Irish famine, the potato blight, and you realize all those potatoes come from South America. I mean, we've had globalization for 500 years and probably longer. So anyway, go ahead, Collin.
Oh, to connect with that, it's also serfdom changed dramatically over its history. And like back around like 1000, there were freemen were flocking to be serfs. They provided more security and assurances, and especially in the Middle Ages, it had solid legal protections. If you were a freeman, you were free. You would do whatever you want, and you would suffer, and you didn't have protection. And so it was very much this thing that people loved. And then 500 years later, Europe changes, and people on multiple levels, whether they're like kings or even counts, they're wanting to centralize. And then they use their position and their responsibility with these people serfs, and they start basically misusing it. And that's where our idea of serfdom comes from. And I guess you could kind of look on it in a way of like today with something like maybe with social securities and stuff, where it's like the government's promised to protect this stuff for the people, but then there's a bunch of money just sitting around, and maybe they want to start getting their fingers in that and abusing. And how long is it going to be until they really do that sort of thing?
Yeah, the Tolkien biography is interesting when Russia, frees the serfs, and then Tolstoy decides he's going to have a school for his serfs. He's also sleeping with some of the women too, but it's so human. It's so human. All these enlightened idea, but it's like, yeah, but this one serf, she's really hot. So people. All right. Any final comments before I end the stream?
Yeah, Helen, who is Helen, whatever she did, the interview with Jordan Peterson, has a really good book on genius with a very good chapter on Tolstoy, if you like Tolstoy.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Helen Lewis.
Yeah, Helen Lewis. Yeah.
Right.
I just want to say I found a 5 times distilled bottle of vodka in my backyard as I was sitting out here in the grass. And there's a street right on the other side of the wall. So I don't know how that's relevant to our discussion, but
your wife is definitely just behind you.
Right. So I have no idea.
All right. Any branding requests?
Holy Smokes. Or what was that song? The
Holy
groovy
Smoke
song.
and Mirrors?
Yeah, Holy Smoke and Mirrors.
You like that one, huh?
It's good.
All that AI music and glitchy AI hippies, and it's for a podcast that never was. It wasn't even my podcast. So thank you all for participating, and enjoy what's left of whatever day it is for you.
Ooh, yeah. Can you feel it? That sweet, sweet revelation. The truth is served. Take a sip. Now don't you question, just obey. Groove with us and fade away.
In other news, Ron Copperman was arrested last night after attempting to reveal secret sacred truths of the TLC to an unknown sociologist.
Hold on a second. It's the cops.
Oh no.
Ron Copperman, minister. I set the alarm off. Oh my God, dude.
What's your name, sir?
Ron Copperman. Yeah.
18A.
TLC authorities have indicated that the Copper Man is being held at an undisclosed facility until he repents of his false prophecy. Back to you, Tim.
Ducks eat bread.
They do. They like it.
Still I have it. There are moments I conveniently forget that I'm a 40-year-old man. The last vestiges of a ghost long dead. The ghost with the Messiah complex. A Messiah too lazy to rise or ascend. Happily hurt and hard. The hanger-on or haunting of a time past. A heroic dream of the harrowing of hell. Failure to launch. Cling to a life vest. Treading in spells that linger and last. Mom and Dad, righteous and mad, daydreamers with ghosts of their own. My memory of them stoic, looking with aims to pretend. Always on the brink of somewhere. Each a child dancing on the fence. On down the river. Dreamt in the sunshine. Saturday morning cartoons, the only Sabbath I knew. A disciple of Jim Henson and John Hughes. Worship in cathedrals where the Toys R Us. Baptized in ball pits. A clown served the sacrament we eat. More Pepsi and Pizza Hut. Say please. Say cheese. Between Kurt Cobain, a scrambled cable screen, towers tumbling, Super Bowls, and reality TV, the ghost is constitutionally unwilling and intrinsically unable to see and be seen, searching madly for attention to seek. But you could be anything. Never say never. If you've got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing, ever. Don't talk to strangers, see what I say, just do it. You don't listen very well, do you? You don't do very well, do you? You're not looking too good, are you? Keep up. Appearances aren't what they seem. Will you ever grow up? You look like you're stuck. You think you took too much. Echoes the ghost within the host who prays the dead bury their dead and stay buried in a fading dream.
You heard your neighbor go on about Jesus. They claim their life is renewed. You're happy for them and wonder about it, but surely that isn't for you. Well, what does it mean, and where does life lead, and what they say, could it be true? Well, open your mind, my my friend, you may find that Jesus is calling you to. We hear explanations, we try to be patient, opinions the world doesn't lack. They say he's the way, have faith and be safe. It's almost as simple as that. You look for a sign, well this is the time. The answers have come into view. He wipe all your tears and cancel your fears. Well, Jesus is calling you to a strong hesitation for great invitation, a feeling we've all felt ourselves. And now we are gathered as life-giving water, it overflows out of the well. Well, he is the man and he has a plan. You're wondering what you should do. I tell you, arise, repent, be baptized, for Jesus is calling you to. Though life won't be perfect, few things will be certain. We follow with all of our hearts. We walk in the light, we can see with our eyes. We understand only in part. We pick up our cross, we don't count our loss. What else is there left to do? The way it is right, his burden is light. Yes, Jesus is calling you to. We all know there's something that's wrong with existence. The nations are warring with blame. But what if I told you a good guy, he loves you, but sin, it has kept us away. There's got to be more, and you can be sure eternity time flies into. But as your days in, you still have a friend when Jesus is calling you to. And when your days in, you still have a friend when Jesus is calling you to.